Hi, and welcome to Trauma Talk with Tina. I'm Tina. This is my outlet to share my experience, strength, and hope with others who have suffered from the effects of betrayal trauma. Hey there. Today I want to talk about step 1 in the 12-step recovery program for betrayal trauma and how I found salifeline.org, which is my 12-step group. I first suffered from betrayal trauma about 20 years ago, and I didn't have the resources to help me other than my clergy and my family. And eventually, things got better, and I moved on. However, it's been more recently that I've suffered betrayal trauma that I've really come to feel a lot of deep shame about how could this happen again? Why me? What's wrong with me? Well, it took a friend, a neighborhood friend, to tell me that her parents created salifeline.org, which helps sex addicts and those who are betrayed to find the resources that they need and to attend the groups that they need to support them through their recovery. So I was really nervous. My first time I went to an online group, and I didn't dare say a thing. But you know what? The coolest thing was I got on there and all of the different video screens came up of different women in the group. And one of the women just got really happy and excited. And she's like, "Hey, how are you?" And I was like, I was a little bit scared, but I was thinking, wait a minute, if we're all here for betrayal trauma and she is so happy, how is this possible? Maybe there really is hope and healing through these 12-step groups. That first meeting, again, was scary, and I didn't dare say anything. And when it got to the sharing time, I just clicked on and I said, "This is my first time. I don't know what I'm supposed to say, but I'm interested in finding out more." Step 1 says, "We admitted we were powerless over blank, whatever addiction has come into your life, whether it's alcoholism, sexaholism, narcotics, drug abuse, anything like that. We admitted we were powerless over the addiction and that our lives had become unmanageable." Boy, was that true for me. I had tried everything. Like I said, I'd gone to clergy, I went to family, which ended up just hurting them more because they didn't know how to help me either. I went to a therapist, but he didn't help us with specifically what we needed. The 12-step group helped me to realize a lot of different things. First of all, I had to admit that I was powerless. I couldn't do anything to change the past. I can't do anything to change the future. And one of the best things that I learned in step 1 is that I didn't create the addiction, which also means I can't cure it. So if I didn't create it, then I'm not to blame for it, and I don't need to carry that blame on my shoulders. I'm not responsible for it. The other thing is I can't cure it, so there's no use in trying to control the addict in my life. The only thing that I can control is me and my choices, and the only way that I can protect myself is by creating boundaries. And boundaries can be physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, sexual. Did you even know there are listening boundaries? But I'll talk about boundaries in another episode. Today I want to talk about step 1. So the 3 major things that I learned, as well as all of that, is how to surrender. Surrendering is letting go of the control that I thought I had, but I don't have. So many times the betrayed think that we can control everything. I'll put filters on computers. I'll dump out all the alcohol. I'll do everything I can so that the addict can't practice his addiction. The point of it is, he or she is going to practice that addiction no matter what we do. And so the only thing that we can do is take care of ourselves, create boundaries to protect ourselves. The next thing that step 1 helped me to recognize were patterns of behavior that I practiced that contributed to the chaos, whether that's fighting, arguing, yelling, raging, getting into arguments with the addict, which only forced him to go practice his addiction and to self-medicate. Realizing that those behaviors didn't help the relationship prompted me to learn that I need to practice different behaviors. And a lot of that is backing away and to stop trying to control everything in my life and to stop trying to control the addict in my life. But the most wonderful thing about that is that there is a higher power. And the wonderful thing about 12 steps is it doesn't dictate who or what your higher power is. You can choose. For me, I'm Christian, and so I'm going to go with that. But it also says to listen to the spirit, to your soul, and listen to that higher power and reflect on what that higher power's plan is for me and to follow that along with this program. So surrendering to God is number one thing that I learned. Learning to surrender and give up that control. A lot of people write down their surrender on a piece of paper and put it into a box or a jar. And that is a physical representation of, I surrender the outcome of this situation, and you give it to God. Now that's different than forgiving. Surrendering is letting go of control, admitting to myself that I am not in control of whatever it is that I'm surrendering. And generally what I surrender are things that I obsess about or that I really compulsively want to control. And those things I need to give to God and allow Him to take care of it. Forgiveness, on the other hand, is something that I learned near the end of the process of the 12 steps. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. One thing that my sponsor taught me that was really great with step 1 was that I am not responsible for the addict's addiction. So what am I responsible for? How can I let go of all the things that I want to control so that I feel safe, right? So she said, create a column for God, a column for myself, and a column for the addict in my life. And write down the responsibilities that each person has in this relationship. So what are my responsibilities? My responsibilities are to take care of myself, to control my emotions, to act respectfully towards others, and to provide a safe environment for people around myself. I'm also in control of my own boundaries. If I don't feel safe, I need to go. Rather than stay and fight, I need to go, calm down, meditate, do yoga, whatever it is that will help me to calm down and keep my serenity. Now, the addict, all of those things are his responsibility for himself. He is in charge of stopping his addiction, remaining sober, calling a sponsor, going to his program, going to his therapist. All of those things are his responsibility. In the beginning, I even called and made appointments for my husband to go to a therapist. That's not my responsibility. And even the therapist was like, he needs to make these appointments, not you. So he was going begrudgingly because I set up the appointment. That means he's not going with his own free will. And free will is so important in recovery and allowing others to learn and grow at their own pace. And free will is so important in recovery and allowing others to learn and grow at their own pace. So what is God's responsibility? For God, I wrote down, well, his responsibility is to take care of his children, each individually. Yes, he can bless our marriage and help us as a couple, but each of us needs to choose to participate and cooperate in that relationship. And so, again, God's role is to protect, influence, provide comfort and guidance to each one of us individually. I'm not in charge of giving God's message to my husband. My husband is in charge of getting his revelation for himself from his higher power. So that 3-column chart really helped me to understand what my responsibility is and what is my husband's and what is God's. Now, the last thing I want to say about step 1 is that each of us needs to define what sobriety means for us as the betrayed. For the addict, of course, sobriety is not participating in his drug of choice, whatever it is. Sobriety, for me, means that I'm not trying to control things. I'm not obsessing or worrying. I'm not stuck in the past mentally, and I'm not fearful of the future. For me, I also strive to be able to stand in my truth and hold my boundaries, and that is what sobriety means for me. Now, there's also, for the addict, there's a difference between sobriety and recovery. Sobriety means that they're just abstaining from the drug of choice, but recovery means that they're actively participating in therapy and groups, in reading books to help them, and they're talking to a sponsor or accountability partner to help them stay in a recovery state of mind. And for the addicts, they will have to find that on their own. For us, as the betrayed, each one of us can find a sponsor through a 12-step program so that we can go through our step work with our sponsor, and the sponsor can also help to point out if and when we're sober or not. One time I was talking to my sponsor and she's like, nope, you're not sober. And I'm like, what? And it's totally different for us than the addict because we're not using a drug of choice per se. The drug might be our family member. It might be our emotional dependency on that family member. And so it helps to have a sponsor. Any program that doesn't have a sponsor to help guide you through the process of the 12 steps will just be a little bit more difficult. You can do it, but if there's someone there that knows exactly how you're feeling and has been through all the same emotions, all the same betrayal, and understands the same addiction that is influencing your family, it's a lot easier to understand and to recover. So I highly recommend getting a sponsor or an accountability partner in whatever 12-step group that you get. And don't be afraid of going. It's a little nerve-wracking at first, but everybody is so welcoming and loving. And again, I highly recommend it. And if one 12-step program doesn't work for you, you don't find a connection, find another group. There are lots of resources out there, and I'll be sharing those here on my channel. If you suffer from betrayal trauma, you're not alone. In fact, betrayal trauma is suffered by more people than you probably think possible. So look for more videos in the future and feel free to leave any questions or helpful comments for others down below.